Welcome to Corpus Conversations, a podcast series hosted by Jonas Goals. Throughout this series, we'll be chatting with senior industry leaders about current business challenges, market trends, and hopefully offering some useful insights, while sharing a few laughs along the way. We hope these conversations will give you a light bulb moment, a new strategy or idea, or just a different perspective that helps you lead your business forward in 2021 and beyond.
Welcome to Corpus Conversations. My name is Jonas Golse. I'm your host. Today, I'm talking to Nadia Shubura, a serial entrepreneur and former Amazon executive, responsible for the global supply chain and fulfillment platform, and Tori Frame, a former Diageo executive, Bain partner and friend of mine, who is currently doing a PhD in artificial intelligence. Tori, I had the incredible privilege working with you many years ago in London. And I remember at times on one of our projects, we would be there till late at night, getting the rooms ready for CEO workshops, thinking through how do we really have the right conversations with, I think, over 150 executives from around the world for one of our clients. And I experienced you working incredibly hard with an incredible dedication. And then during the time we worked together, I had health reasons in my family that I had to step out. And I remember you coming along, myself and the team, and helping me really make the right decisions at that time. And so I would love to kick off our podcast conversation just reflecting a little bit. How have you kept that balance between the determination, working hard, getting the teams in your career to really deliver incredible results, but at the same time having that sensitivity to be able to step back and saying at certain points in time, all right, we have to reset how we do this?
I think it's all about energy for me. And all my career, I have made seemingly crazy financial decisions. So like moving from banking, going right to a first year AC in consulting, or moving from a case team leader role at my firm before business school to write a first-year consultant after business school. And even now, leaving a very well-paid job to earn nothing. And the thing that's driven that move every time has been a passion and an energy and a real interest in what I'm doing. But then I've also been very aware of positive and lack of energy. And if someone has got something that's really, really important in their life, and genuinely, the health of your wife is absolutely extraordinarily important and your children, then you can't expect that individual to bring their energy and their full self to work. It's far, far better for them if they actually get the time to go and make things right and do the right thing. And I've done that with myself too. At stages of my career when it hasn't been the right thing to do to go full pelt, it's been quite easy to pull back because of that energy isn't there anymore.
Nadia, it's nice to have you on the podcast as well. Thank you for joining us. You emigrated, Nadia, from Russia to Israel and then to the US and had an exceptional career from a software developer to being an executive with Amazon to being a successful entrepreneur with Pointer. And I would love to start off by asking you, what has been the driving force for you during the different stages of your career?
For me, I think the most important is to have fun and enjoy what I'm doing by far. And for example, for my passion for retail and for business at Amazon stems from me growing up in Russia and not having any retail at all. In fact, when I was growing up in a Soviet era. And the retail experience was really interesting. You come to the store and there's absolutely nothing. Whoever brings something, that's what you take. And whether it's wrong size or things you don't want, you just take what they give you. And after this, living with that for many years, when I crossed the border and I walked in a first store, which was in Hungary, I just couldn't believe myself. I thought everything is fake. But what I learned quickly is that not only it's very real, but it has a tremendous impact on our lives. Having a fantastic experiences makes you happy, makes you healthy. And so it's that going from very shallow retail experience and suddenly the ability to create something entirely unbelievable. It drove me all my life.
That's so interesting. I remember when I was younger, we had family in the east of Germany, and so we would go and visit them. So I had actually the opposite experience, that I would walk into a store in the East Germany part and I would be like, that's not a supermarket. So it was
Well,
a
see,
very
the East
interesting
Germany
experience.
for me was a dream. That would have been the dream store where I'm coming from.
For me too, different countries have been very helpful in identifying energy and passion too. So, for instance, I grew up in Pakistan, Brazil, Venezuela, the Philippines, and Mexico. And one of the things I was really struck by moving from Pakistan to Brazil was just how different, for instance, women's role in society was. Like at the age of 6, you see women completely covered up. You go somewhere else and they're out having a great time being the centers of society. And that idea that the reality that you're in, no one else can see that there's anything different about the reality, that there could be another reality. And that's one of the privileges of working in lots of different markets, is you get to open up. And therefore working with different companies, it's really interesting because the company will, a lot of them will think that things just work in a particular way. And it's lovely having experiences of different countries or different companies that give you that privilege of helping them see that there's another way.
I wanted to reflect a little bit with both of you on the role of women, especially in STEM roles. You both have brilliant examples, both are brilliant examples for not just being leader in your field, but also influencing the discussion. And I would, Tori, to your point, right, that difference in experience between Pakistan and Brazil, how has that experience changed from a perspective on women in leadership roles, in leadership roles with a STEM element to it, technology, from when you started your career to what it is now?
Yeah, definitely. And I've actually gone through a bit of a roller coaster on that, in that I started off in banking as the only female analyst. Then in consulting, very much enjoying working with lots of male colleagues. But then at one stage, the firm asked me to help bring more females into the leadership. And then I ended up at, Diageo, where literally, I'm going to get these stats wrong, but something like 40 or 50% of the exec team was female, same with the board. So it felt like this was what it was supposed to be. And then coming to do an MSc in computer science, that's what I started with, to test whether I actually could do an AI PhD. And I was absolutely stunned to be right back at the start again. And the most amazing thing is one of the courses I get to do, which is super interesting in my PhD, is all the political and social side of AI and how it's progressed over the years. And Nadia, I don't know if you know this, but apparently in the UK, in the 30s and 40s, computer science and programming was seen as a female thing. And then when all the men came back from war in the 1950s, it was perceived as important to give them jobs, and they pulled out. And suddenly, for some reason, computer science became a male thing. So I'm quite excited now to be actually working to change that. And I'm doing coding for girls. I actually do coaching once a week. And I absolutely love some of the stuff which we did back in consulting, which was just making sure there's enough role models so people can see actually there's absolutely no reason why this should be a male thing.
Nadia, how was it for you when you were a software developer in Israel? Were there a lot of women?
I started my career back in Russia, where I was the only girl in a mass high school, and then in Israel, where I was the only computer programmer woman in the company. And as I moved to United States, I was rarely surrounded by women, but I lacked, and what some of my colleagues lack, is self-confidence and the ability to speak up and talk about your work and be more aggressive about your successes. What helped me a lot was I joined Amazon early on, and I worked for Jeff Bezos. And what he did is he created a really interesting mechanism on our team. And that is, every subject, every question, every person who is in the room had to contribute something. And so he would open up a question and he would make sure that everybody spoke. Through that discussion, it forced me to speak, and it forced me to speak all the time. And then it became natural. But I think for women, it's a skill which we have, it's a confidence is what sometimes are holding us back.
It's interesting when you look at what the World Economic Forum is saying about the future capabilities. Well, they are relatively high level, but you can read things like strategic problem solving, analytical thinking. And we all know those were key capabilities for a long time now, and get developed very well in top tier consulting firms. And I thought it was interesting to see that technology use is one area, but then also technology design and programming. Tori, you mentioned to me when we first talked that you felt like that to really understand technology design and programming, it's very hard for an executive or management role to do that. And it's actually really important to go deeper.
Sure. So it actually started in a very simple way when I was CMO at Barry's Bootcamp. And I had a relatively unanalytical team, and I had to do Google Analytics myself. So when I was later in a senior role in a far bigger company, it was very clear that people at my level, there's absolutely no way that those people had ever done Google Analytics. They probably had people like 2 or 3, I don't even know how many levels down, actually using them. And so the types of insights you can get into the results that are shown to you and the questions you can ask and the engagement you can get with a topic, to me was really interesting. And I really enjoyed that skip level or multi-skip level insight that I got from that. And so when I was doing digital strategy, I was always struck that I probably wasn't asking all the correct questions, particularly when it related to AI. And I had amazing AI technical experts, but somehow I didn't fully understand their language, and they certainly didn't fully understand mine. And I've actually since read some people like Wiener. You probably know Wiener, Nadia, the guy who invented cybernetics. And the people who can create these new spaces talk a lot about getting experts from the two fields or the multiple fields and getting them to learn a bit about each other and learn each other's language. And through there, in Ireland, we say you create magic between things. So I fully believe that. And I have to say that last year was a nightmare learning how to code. Good on you, Nadia, for having it done it all that time ago. It did my head in getting some of the concepts, my head around some of the concepts. But now that I can do some pretty hardcore machine learning, it's so interesting, the insights that you can get and the solutions that you can think of to problems that you could never even imagine when you were just on the strategic problem side, because you didn't know the tools that you could have to solve it.
But if you're a senior executive in a company, would you advise me to go and code and try to go down to the lowest level of detail?
You know, I think it all depends about passion and time. I know it took me a year. By the way, my coding, it's possible. I can get by, no problem. But one of the reasons I found coding so hard was, as you know, it just takes time. You just have to put the hours in and make all the mistakes. And it's just a different type of learning. So if someone's willing to give up a certain amount of time, I don't know if it is a year, what I'd love to do is actually relook at the curriculum and think about, for particular types of executives, what do they really need to understand? And how could you accelerate their insight into what they need to understand to have a proper discussion with the technical experts?
You know, to me, I personally love coding, and I do coding instead of reading. You know, some people read book, I code. I just love it. And I code a lot. But I do have full appreciation that, if you're a senior executive, you cannot afford to take an hour a day and go and learn and code and things like that. I think one way an executive could learn technology and could have a full appreciation of it and know where to take the company is not by diving into details, not by coding, but by playing.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things which we did in my last role was we had this whole thing once a year called disruptive forces. And so we kind of stepped back and looked at the world and said, what are all the disruptive forces out there that are going to have like a big impact? And then what was really cool was different executives would own them. So someone actually who had no interest really previously, Nadia, to your point, in say smart home devices and home automation or car self-driving, actually for the year, they would be thinking about what the right thing to do in that area is. And so that starts to build a desire to take risks and to experiment. which is really good in these edges because it's all moving so much faster. It's hard for an executive who had experience of these things. That's just not the way it works anymore.
I wanted to talk with you a little bit about business automation as well. And one area where we in our work have seen business automation play a really important role is at the intersection between cost reduction or cost consciousness in organizations and the customer experience, and not creating tensions where no tensions need to be, but really bringing those two things together and making the experience for customers better, reducing costs, really creating a symbiosis there. And I think Nadia Hoynte is a great example of bringing those things really closely together. I would love to hear from you, Nadia. How do you think about business automation? You obviously spent a lot of time thinking about it, a lot of different examples in your previous roles and now in your role as a board member for several organizations. How do you think about business automation, and what are the critical success factors for you?
I think a lot about where we need automation and where automation is going to help a person and where automation is going to replace a person and what is the right use case. Because the most amount of mistakes I've made in my life is where I mixed them up and I tried to put too much automation where it didn't need it, and etc. So I spent a lot of time thinking about what we as humans doing best and what computers or robotics does best and how to mix and match it in the most productive way.
And what are some of the learnings for you that you found out of that? What do you think are some of the things that humans do really well and probably will never be replaced?
I think when there are simple mathematical decisions based on a lot of data, a lot of volume, computers are very good. For example, in retail, if you need to make decisions for thousands of stores, if you thinking about a network of warehouses, computers are just better because it's a lot of data, a lot of facts, and human intuition fails all the time. And I tested my intuition against the computer intuition while with Amazon all the time, and computer was beating me. My intuition was wrong, even though I was developing it for many years, and I was super proud of my personal understanding of supply chain. But computers were consistently making smarter decisions. But when it's there isn't enough data, where it's something new, where a computer is not very smart, the human intuition, don't try to replace it with computers. It's just better to trust your gut.
Tori, how do you see artificial intelligence play into business automation?
Well, I was really interested in what Nadia was saying, and I wonder, Nadia, like when you were talking there, you were talking about full replacement, so automation, and then I think you're also talking about augmentation, weren't you? You were talking about how to use technology to help a human be more successful. I'm really interested in the ethics of AI. So obviously in business, there's huge amounts of upside to be gained from augmentation and automation. But the general populace can be quite terrified of it. And I think the more that we use AI to help people be better versions of themselves, the less fear there is and the more benefits that we can bring to society. And in fact, one of my favorites recently, I don't know if you know, but do you remember Sabine Azanko? She's just started work at Affinity, which is a company which matches calls that come into a call center. They match the type of customer and the type of problem they have to an agent who's going to have an affinity to deal with them. And it's absolutely extraordinary the types of results that they're getting from that AI, because what they're really doing is unlocking the super agents who are extraordinary at a particular thing and pairing them up with someone whose problem that they will delight in solving.
Tori, what are some of the things you're hearing about, or even in your own work in AI, that you think will really be game changers in terms of business automation and how we think about processes in organizations in the future?
Oh, what a big question. The thing which excites me most is marketing and the sales side and the people side, that customer experience side, where I do think it's really interesting what AI can do. And I just actually saw something today that I forwarded on to my former colleagues in marketing and innovation. Absolutely amazing technology now where you can type in the words like avocado shaped chair. You might have seen this. And then it actually makes up through neural networks a whole bunch of images of this avocado chair, for instance, that are beautiful and fully represent what something might be.
What about you, Nadia? You're seeing a lot, obviously, as well in the US through your work. What are some of the things that you are interesting you and exciting you at the moment?
I spend a lot of time thinking about the home and where the home is heading. And I think my home is smarter than I am, knowing what I want and when I want it, and learning from my routines and predicting what I would want to know in the future. And it's addictive. Once first it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but then when it works, it's addictive. You'll never go back. I think my grandchildren will live a very different life than me, and many boring and annoying things will be just done for them without any effort.
And on that one, actually reminds me of another thing. I agree, smart homes is awesome. I'm super interested in smart cities because I'm also interested in the political side. And so, for instance, I lived in China for 3 years. And when you live in China, you definitely know that there's some surveillance going on. And what they're doing now in terms of outfitting smart cities with just an ability to watch absolutely everything that's going on and then deliver citizens benefits by getting ambulances somewhere in a quarter of the time, in halving the amount of traffic that's occurring in a city. So you have a population accepting this degree of surveillance. And then you have the government partnering with people like, for instance, Baidu, who are like the Yahoo of China, but they also do autonomous vehicles. And they're actually building a city 100 kilometers outside Beijing that is entirely smart. So when you think about that as a petri dish, as like a place where we could have extraordinary innovation with a very different view on privacy, because we all know that you get more learning when you can link up data to an individual.
Tori, what are your final words on the future of technology, on artificial intelligence at the moment? What would you say kind of to the end of the podcast?
I think the most exciting thing is that we have absolutely no idea where it's going to go. And we know that it's going to be both far more powerful and more impactful in our society than anything we can even begin to dream of now. And yet at the same time, we are so far away from the singularity and from machines being able to replace humans. It's also extraordinary. So when we look back, we'll laugh at the things that we thought machines might once do. And for me, I guess the most interesting thing is medium term around the use cases, the things that we could actually start to change. So rather than just cost and automation, but actually getting onto marketing and sales and innovation and stuff, that's the kind of the fun stuff that we probably have more ability to understand what might happen. And that's probably where our investments should be going.
Nadia, what are your final words?
I think we'll see a lot of interesting things within our lifetime. And that is very exciting for me. But a good way and a very scary way to think about it is look 1,000 years ahead. And for example, at Amazon, we spend a lot of time thinking not 5 years, but 1,000 years. Jeff Bezos is building a 10,000-year clock, which and concepts like that, they're very scary and they're very uncomfortable and they're very uncertain. And you're not going to be there to witness it. But and so that's why it's very scary and uncomfortable. But it's it's a very interesting conversation and takes your brain into really scary places.
Thank you so much. It's been fantastic to talk to you both and also have you guys have a conversation. It's been really, really good. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining our Corpus conversation today. We would love to connect with you. Sign up to our podcast, follow us on LinkedIn, or email us at connect@corpus.team.